November 1919, Appalachian Mountains, West Virginia. The cabin stood alone against the winter sky, smoke rising thin and straight from its stone chimney. Snow had been falling since
When I was
midnight,
your
covering the
age,
pines in
I sat
white
right here
that
by
made the
this
world look
fire,
clean and
dreaming of
new, as if
adventures
the
far
past could
beyond
be
these
buried
walls.
under enough cold silence. Inside, firelight painted shadows across rough, wooden walls. Ethan Stone sat in the chair his wife had loved, the one that faced the hearth, so she could watch flames dance while she mended clothes or read her Bible. He was 58 now, beard gone silver, shoulders still, broad as an ox yoke, but carrying the weight of 3 decades of memory. His hands scarred from wilderness and war, wrapped around a tin cup of whiskey. Across from him sat his grandson. Thomas was 17, dark-haired and restless, with the kind of nervous energy that comes from knowing your life is about to change forever. The draft notice lay folded in his coat pocket. Tomorrow morning he would board a train heading east. The Great War was ending, but boys were still shipping out. Boys who had never seen death were being sent to shake hands with it. Thomas could not sit still. He kept standing, pacing to the window, sitting back down, standing again. Finally he spoke. "Grandfather, I'm scared." The admission came out rough, like something he had been choking on. "Scared I'll be weak when it matters. Scared I won't have the courage when the moment comes." Ethan took a slow drink of whiskey, let the burns settle in his chest. Outside, the wind pushed against the cabin walls, making the old wood creak like a ship at sea. He had been waiting for this conversation. Knew it was coming the moment Thomas walked up the mountain path 3 days ago with that look in his eyes. "You want to know about courage?" Ethan asked. His voice was low, roughened by years of mountain cold and tobacco. "Let me tell you about the time I bought a human soul for $1. About what she taught me. About what real courage looks like when you strip away all the stories and legends." He poured a second cup of whiskey, pushed it across the small table toward Thomas. The boy hesitated, then took it. 17 was old enough for liquor, old enough for truth. "This isn't a hero's tale," Ethan said. "Not the kind they put in books or tell around campfires to make young men brave. This is about being scared and doing it anyway. About one choice leading to 100 more. About $1 that bought more than freedom." Thomas leaned forward, the restlessness drained out of him, replaced by something deeper. He was ready to listen. Ethan stared into the fire, let himself drift back. 30 years melted away like snow on warm stone. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of memory. "December 1889. I was 28 years old." The flames seemed to brighten. The cabin walls faded, and Ethan was young again, riding down from the mountain toward a town called Whitewood, leading a pack horse loaded with pelts and running from ghosts that would not let him rest. December 15th, 1889. Whitewood, West Virginia. The snow fell thick that morning, turning Main Street into a river of white. Ethan had not been to town in 4 months. Had not wanted to be. Up in his cabin, high where the eagles nested and the wind cut like broken glass, he could pretend the world below did not exist. Could pretend that 6 months ago he had not made a mistake that cost an innocent man his life. Could pretend that the badge he had turned in still meant something, that justice was more than just a word men used to justify their violence. But a man has to eat, and pelts do not sell themselves. So there he was, leading his horse through Whitewood's frozen streets, feeling the stares of townspeople who knew him by reputation only. The mountain hermit, the lawman who quit, the man who killed Daniel Garrett and could not live with himself after. He was heading toward the trading post when he heard it. Laughter, the cruel kind. The kind that makes your gut twist because you know someone's suffering is the punchline. Ethan turned toward the lumberyard. A crowd had gathered on the auction platform where they usually sold timber and livestock. Maybe 40 men circled something at the center. Their breath rose like steam from cattle. But this was not timber they were selling. It was a woman. She wore the black and white habit of a nun, but it was torn, dirty, stained with mud and what looked like dried blood. Her hands were bound with rough hemp rope that had cut into her wrists until they bled. Her face was pale as the snow lips cracked and bleeding eyes hollow with the kind of fear that comes from knowing mercy is a foreign language here. She could not have been more than 23, maybe 24. Young enough that this should not be happening, old enough to understand exactly what it meant. Around her neck, catching what little sunlight broke through the gray clouds, hung a wooden cross on a simple cord. Ethan's heart stopped. It was the same cross Margaret had worn, the same design carved by the same hands at St. Catherine's Convent. He knew because he had held Margaret's cross the night she died 6 months ago, had pressed it into her palm. While she whispered prayers he did not believe anymore, but let her speak anyway because they brought her comfort. The auctioneer was a pig of a man named William Drake. Everyone knew Drake. Everyone hated Drake. But fear keeps mouths shut in small towns, and Drake had plenty of reasons to be feared. He ran lumber camps up north where men went in strong and came out broken if they came out at all. Drake held up a piece of paper, waving it like a victory flag. Gentlemen, gentlemen, last item of the day, one nun hardly used, can read and write, knows her medicines. Starting bid $10. The crowd laughed. Someone shouted, "What kind of fool pays for damaged goods?" Drake grinned, showing teeth stained yellow from tobacco. Fair point, fair point. Let's say 5 then. More laughter. The woman, this nun, she did not cry, did not beg, just stood there swaying slightly, like a tree that has been cut, but has not fallen yet. Then she whispered something, so quiet most men did not hear it. But Ethan did. Please, do it quick. She thought someone would buy her to kill her, thought that was mercy. Something in Ethan's chest cracked open, something he had kept locked and buried for 6 months, since Margaret took her last breath, and made him promise to keep living, to keep fighting, to not let her death be meaningless. He pushed through the crowd. Men parted because when a man Ethan's size moves with purpose, you either get out of the way or get moved. Drake saw him coming. The grin faltered for just a second. Well, well, Ethan Stone, thought you died up in that mountain. Ethan did not answer him, just looked at the woman. Her eyes met his. There was no hope in them, just exhaustion so deep it had worn grooves into her face. Then he looked at the paper in Drake's hand. It had a signature at the bottom, an official-looking seal from St. Catherine's Convent. His jaw tightened. How much? Ethan asked. Drake laughed. It was an ugly sound, wet and thick. For the nun, she's stubborn. Got a mouth that talks back. Costs more to feed than she's worth. Tell you what, mountain man, give me $1 and she's yours. Consider it charity. The crowd erupted. A human life for $1. Ethan reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a single silver dollar coin, the last one he had from selling pelts last autumn. He dropped it on the wooden barrel between them. The sound of that coin hitting wood cut through the laughter like a knife through skin. Every man went silent. Drake blinked. You're serious. I need that paper signed, Ethan said. His voice came low controlled, the voice he used when he was a U.S. Marshal before he gave up the badge, before Daniel Garrett. My name on the back, today's date, what you sold, and for how much. Every man here witnesses this transaction. Drake's eyes narrowed. Understanding flickered there. Why, because I'm a careful man. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable now. They knew what Ethan was doing. He was not just buying her. He was creating evidence, legal evidence, the kind that could hang a man for trafficking human beings in a country that had fought a war to end that very thing. Drake knew it too. Ethan could see the calculation in his pig eyes. But greed won out. It always did with men like Drake. He took a pencil from his pocket, scrawled on the back of the paper in handwriting like a child's. Sold Sister Sarah Mitchell to Ethan Stone. $1. 40 witnesses, December 15th, 1889. He shoved the paper at Ethan. There. Now take her and get out of my sight. Ethan folded the paper carefully, put it in his inside coat pocket right next to his heart, where it would stay warm and dry. Then he climbed onto the platform. The woman flinched, thought he was going to grab her, hurt her, claim his property the way men claim livestock. Instead, Ethan pulled his hunting knife from his belt. She closed her eyes. He cut the ropes binding her wrists. You ride with me, he said quietly. Not a command, a statement of fact. Her eyes opened. Confusion flickered across her face like candlelight in wind. What do you want from me? Ethan did not answer, just turned and walked to his horse. After a moment, he heard her footsteps behind him, slow, uncertain, like a person learning to walk again after a long illness. He helped her onto the saddle. She was so light it was like lifting a child. He swung up behind her, keeping a respectful distance, just close enough to steady her if she fell. As they rode out of Whitewood, Ethan felt 40 pairs of eyes on his back. Felt Drake's hatred boring into his spine like a drill bit. Good. Let him hate. Hate was honest, better than the false kindness that had sold this woman in the first place. They rode for 2 hours in silence. The forest closed around them, thick pines heavy with snow. The only sounds were hoofbeats muffled by white powder and the woman's occasional sharp intake of breath when the cold bit too deep through her torn habit. Finally, Ethan stopped by a frozen creek, the kind of place where water runs so pure you can see straight to the stones at the bottom, now locked under ice that looked like clouded glass. He dismounted and helped her down. She stumbled, legs numb from cold in the ride. He caught her elbow, steadied her, then let go immediately. From his saddlebag, he pulled out a tin canteen. The water inside was cold, but not frozen. He poured some into his cupped hand, first drank it himself to show it was safe, then offered her the canteen. She stared at it like it might be poison. "It's just water," Ethan said. She took it with shaking hands, drank, coughed, drank more. While she drank, Ethan pulled out his spare wool coat, forest green, the color Margaret loved. He had bought it 2 years ago, but never wore it because every time he looked at it, he saw her face. He draped it over the woman's shoulders. She looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time, and he saw it, that flicker of something other than fear. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Her voice was hoarse, damaged from screaming or crying or both. "You don't know me." Ethan sat down on a fallen log, pulled out a piece of cornbread from his pack. It was hard as a rock, 3 weeks old, but it was food. He broke it in half, offered her one piece. She took it, tried to bite. Her teeth barely made a dent. "Is this food?" she asked. And there was something almost like humor in her voice. Amazing. After everything she had been through, she could still find something to laugh about. "Yep," Ethan said, completely serious. "Made it myself 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks, her eyes widened. "Still good. Hasn't killed me yet." And then she laughed. It was a small sound, broken barely more than a breath, but it was a laugh, real and human and alive. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. They sat there in the snow, eating bread that could break teeth while the forest settled into its evening quiet. Birds called their last songs. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled. The woman pulled the coat tighter around herself. "Why did you help me?" she asked again, softer this time. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, watching the light fade through the pine branches, watching the way the snow seemed to glow blue in the dusk. "My wife wore a cross like that," he finally said, nodding at the wooden cross still around her neck. "She was a sister, too. Died 6 months back tending the sick when nobody else would." The woman's expression softened. "I'm sorry." Ethan nodded, did not trust his voice for a second, then continued. "She would have done what I did, probably faster, so I figure I owed her this much." Owed her. Margaret always said the measure of a man isn't what he believes, it's what he does when nobody's watching. When it's hard. When it costs something. The woman looked down at her hands, at the raw rope burns on her wrists. "That paper you made him sign. You were creating evidence." "I was." "Evidence of what?" Ethan looked at her directly. "Evidence that William Drake is a slave trader. And in this country, that's a hanging offense." Her breath caught. "Eventually, sir," Ethan continued, "when the time's right, when we have enough proof that no judge can ignore it." She was quiet for a moment. "Then unless you'd rather I take you back." "No." The word came out fast, panicked, then softer. "No, please." "Then you and me, we're going to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else." The forest had gone fully dark now. Time to move. Ethan stood, offered her his hand. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. Her hand was small in his, cold, still trembling, but her grip was firm. They rode the last hour to his cabin in darkness, guided only by starlight in the memory of trails Ethan had walked 1,000 times. When they finally arrived, he helped her down and led her inside. The cabin was simple, one room with a stone fireplace, a wooden bed in the corner, a small table and 2 chairs, dried herbs hanging from the rafters, pelts stacked against the wall, and on a small shelf, Margaret's Bible, her prayer beads, and her cross, identical to the one the woman wore. She saw them and stopped. "Your wife," she whispered. "Margaret." She was from St. Catherine's. 17 years she served there. Then she married me. Some folks said she was giving up her vocation. She said she was expanding it. Ethan started a fire in the hearth. The flames caught quick, cedar and pine crackling, filling the room with warm light and the smell of forest. "You'll take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep by the fire." "I can't take your bed." "You can and you will. I've slept in worse places." He pulled out one of Margaret's old nightgowns from a trunk. It smelled like wood smoke and dried lavender. Handed it to her. "There's a washing basin behind that curtain. Water in the pitcher. Take your time." She took the nightgown like it was made of gold. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We've got hard days ahead." While she washed and changed, Ethan sat by the fire, pulled out the paper Drake had signed, read it again by firelight. Legal proof clear as day. But it was not enough. One signature would not bring down an entire operation, because Ethan knew deep in his gut that Drake was not working alone. Men like him never do. Someone had given him this woman. Someone had signed those papers from St. Catherine's. Someone inside the convent was selling nuns and orphans. The woman emerged from behind the curtain wearing Margaret's nightgown. It was too big on her sleeves, hanging past her hands, but she looked warmer, more human. "Ethan," she said quietly. "Yeah. When you said we're going to stop this, what did you mean?" He poked the fire, watching sparks spiral up the chimney. "I mean, we're going to find out who at St. Catherine's sold you. We're going to get proof, and we're going to make sure they never sell another soul." "It was Mother Beatrice," the woman said. Her voice went tight, hard. "She's the Mother Superior. She's the one who did this." Ethan looked up sharply. "You're certain?" "I saw the ledger 2 months ago. I was cleaning her office and I found it hidden behind a painting of the Virgin Mary." She paused. Tears started streaming down her face now, but she kept talking. "It had names, 30 children, 7 nuns, all sold, all with prices next to their names like they were livestock at market." Ethan's blood went cold. 30 children. She nodded. Orphans, kids with nowhere else to go. She sold them to coal mines, lumber camps, anywhere that would pay. The youngest was 6 years old. He stood up, fists clenched, so tight his knuckles went white. "Margaret died trying to save children at that convent. And all the while, the woman in charge was selling them like cattle." The woman wiped her tears. When she looked up, something had changed in her face. Fear was still there, but something else too, something harder. "Mother Beatrice found out I knew," she continued. "She drugged my evening tea. When I woke up, I was in Drake's wagon, bound and gagged. He laughed and said I'd fetch a good price at one of his camps. But he brought you to Whitewood instead. He said I was damaged goods, said I fought too much, talked back. Easier to sell me public and be done with it." Ethan sat back down. His mind raced through possibilities and plans. This was not just about saving this woman anymore. This was bigger. This was about justice for 30 children who could not speak for themselves. "We need that ledger," he said. "It's suicide to go back there. Mother Beatrice will have told Drake by now that I know about it. He'll be watching. Then we'll have to be smarter than him." The woman wiped the last of her tears away. Ethan saw something shift in her expression. Determination replacing despair. "I'll go back," she said. "I know the convent. I know where everything is. But you'll have to get me there, Tati. We'll go together. If you're caught, then we're caught together. That's how this works." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Get some rest," Ethan told her. "We've got maybe 6 hours before Drake realizes what that paper he signed really means. After that, he'll come looking." She climbed into the bed. Ethan added more wood to the fire and settled into his chair, rifle across his lap. Outside, the wind picked up. Snow began to fall harder. The kind of storm that keeps most men indoors. But Ethan was not most men. And tomorrow, neither would she be. Tomorrow, they would start hunting. The problem with being a hunter, though, is sometimes you do not realize you are also being hunted. Ethan woke 3 hours before dawn to a sound that did not belong. It was subtle, just the snap of a branch under snow. Could have been a deer. Could have been the wind. But Ethan had lived in these mountains too long to believe in coincidence. He moved to the window, careful not to make the floorboards creak, peered through a gap in the shutters. 4 sets of tracks in the fresh snow leading right up to his cabin, then circling around back. Someone was watching them. He crossed to the bed, put his hand gently over the woman's mouth before she could scream. Her eyes flew open, wild with panic. "Quiet," he whispered. "We've got company." He removed his hand. She sat up instantly, all softness gone, back in survival mode. "How many?" she whispered. "4 tracks. Could be more." "Drake?" "Don't know. Could be bounty hunters. Could be worse." A knock came on the door, hard and official. "Ethan Stone." The voice was familiar. Ethan's stomach sank. Robert Fletcher. Deputy Robert Fletcher. They had worked together 10 years ago when Ethan was still a marshal. Back when they both believed in justice before Fletcher started believing in whoever paid him most. "I know you're in there, Stone. Open up. This is official business." Ethan looked at the woman. She had gone pale. "You know him?" he asked. "He was there, in Whitewood, watching when Drake sold me. He didn't do anything." "Of course he did not. Fletcher never did anything that did not profit Fletcher." "What do we do?" she whispered. Ethan thought fast. The cabin had 2 exits, front door and a back window that led to the root cellar. If she could get through that window, she could make it to the barn, release the horses, create a distraction. "The back window," he said quietly. "It's small, but you'll fit. Get to the barn, open the stalls. When the horses run, Fletcher and his men will chase them. I'll slip out and come around behind." "That's a military tactic. I learned from the best." "Ethan Stone." Fletcher's voice again angrier now. "Don't make this difficult. The nun you took, she's wanted for theft. You're harboring a criminal." Her eyes widened. "Theft? Mother Beatrice must have reported you stole from the convent. Clever. Makes you the criminal instead of her. So if they take me back, they'll hang me, or worse. Which is why they're not taking you anywhere." Ethan moved to the front door. "Fletcher, that you—" "It's me, Stone. Now open this door before I kick it in." "Give me a minute. I'm not decent." That bought them 30 seconds. Ethan turned to the woman. "Go now. And Sarah?" Yeah, he had not used her name before, had not wanted to make this personal. But now it was. "You're stronger than you know. Trust that." She nodded once, then moved fast and quiet to the back window. For someone who had been half dead yesterday, she moved like a ghost. Ethan watched her slip through, drop into the snow outside, then vanish toward the barn. "Good girl." He counted to 10, then opened the front door. Fletcher stood there with 3 men Ethan did not recognize. Hired guns by the look of them. Cold eyes, hands resting on holstered pistols. Fletcher himself looked rough. 10 years had not been kind. More gray in his beard, more weight around his middle, more meanness in his eyes. "Fletcher," Ethan said evenly. "Stone." He tried to look past Ethan into the cabin. "Where is she? Where's who?" "Don't play stupid. The nun, Sister Sarah Mitchell. You bought her in Whitewood." "I bought a piece of paper. The woman came with it, but she's free to go whenever she wants." "That's not how the law sees it. The law that's rich coming from you, Fletcher." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "I'm here on official business. Mother Beatrice filed a complaint. Sister Sarah stole from the convent. Valuable property. We need to bring her in." "Valuable property or valuable person?" "Because there's a difference, Fletcher, and you know it." "Step aside, Stone." "No." One of the hired guns moved his hand closer to his pistol. Fletcher noticed and held up a hand. "Easy. We don't want trouble." "Then leave." "Can't do that." "Why not?" "What's Drake paying you, or is it Mother Beatrice? How much does it cost to buy a deputy these days?" Fletcher's face flushed red. "You self-righteous bastard. You think you're better than me because you quit. Because you ran away to play mountain man, I stayed. I work the job. I do what needs doing. You work for whoever pays. That's not the same thing." Behind them from the barn came the sound Ethan had been waiting for. Horses bursting free, hooves pounding snow in 3 different directions. "What the hell?" one of the hired guns shouted. "After them," Fletcher yelled. "Those are evidence." The 3 hired guns took off running, idiots chasing horses in deep snow. That left just Fletcher and Ethan. Fletcher turned back, understanding dawning on his face. "You planned that." "Might have." "Where is she, Stone?" "Gone, and you're not finding her." Fletcher's hand dropped to his gun. Ethan moved first. 40 years of wilderness living teaches you to move fast. He closed the distance before Fletcher could draw, grabbed his wrist, twisted. The gun fell into the snow. They went down together, two old men fighting like young fools. Fletcher got in a solid punch to Ethan's ribs. Ethan returned it with one to Fletcher's jaw. They rolled in the snow, grappling, neither willing to quit. Finally, Ethan got him pinned, knee on his chest, hunting knife at his throat. Both of them breathing hard, both knowing this could end badly. "Tell Drake this," Ethan said, voice low and hard. "If he wants her, he'll have to go through me. And I don't die easy. Tell Mother Beatrice the same. Tell them both that paper they signed, that's evidence. Legal evidence. And I'm bringing it to a U.S. Marshal I trust. And when I do, they'll hang." Fletcher stared up at him, fear and anger warring in his eyes. "You're making a mistake, Stone." "I've made worse." Ethan stood up, pulled Fletcher to his feet, shoved him toward his horse. "Ride away, Fletcher, while you still can." Fletcher mounted up, looked back one last time. "It's not just Drake and Mother Beatrice, you know. There's more. Bigger players. You're walking into something you don't understand." "Then help me understand." "I can't. I'm in too deep." He turned his horse and called out to his men. They came back empty-handed, muddy and cursing. They all rode away together, leaving deep tracks in the snow. When they were gone, Sarah emerged from the tree line. "That was close," she said. "Too close. We need to move. Fletcher will report back to Drake within hours. After that, they'll come with more men." "Where do we go?" Ethan looked toward the horizon where the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the snow pink and gold. "We go back to St. Catherine's tonight. While Mother Beatrice thinks we're running, we get that ledger. And then we end this." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "I'm done running." "Good, because so am I." They spent the day preparing. Ethan taught Sarah how to cover tracks in snow, how to move quietly through brush, how to read the forest for signs of pursuit. She learned fast, faster than most men he had trained. Father Samuel, whoever that was, had taught her well. As the sun set, they stood outside the cabin one last time. Ethan strapped on his gun belt, checked his rifle, made sure he had extra ammunition. Sarah wore Margaret's spare traveling clothes, men's trousers and a heavy coat. Practical, warm, nothing to identify her as a nun. "You ready for this?" Ethan asked. She looked at him with those eyes that had seen too much suffering, but had not given up hope. "I've been ready since the moment they tied my hands in that wagon." They rode out as the stars came out, heading back toward the place that had betrayed her. Back toward danger. But this time she was not alone. This time she was the hunter. And God help anyone who stood in their way. The forest at night is a living thing. Every shadow moves. Every sound carries meaning. The snap of a twig could be a deer or a man with a rifle. The rustle of branches could be wind or someone moving parallel to your path, waiting for the right moment to strike. Sarah learned this fast. They rode through Black Ridge, the most treacherous route between Ethan's cabin and St. Catherine's convent. Most travelers avoided it, especially in winter. The path was narrow, winding between rock faces that seemed to lean in close, threatening to crush anyone foolish enough to pass through. But that was exactly why they chose it. Drake and his men would expect them to take the main road. They would set up ambushes there, watching every traveler, every wagon. In Black Ridge, they were alone with the mountain. 2 hours into the ride, Sarah's horse stumbled. Ethan heard the animal's legs snap before he saw it. The sound echoed off the rock walls like a gunshot. The horse went down hard. Sarah rolled clear just in time, landing in snow up to her waist. Ethan dismounted fast, checked Sarah first. She was shaken but unhurt. Then the horse. Front left leg broken clean through. The animal was trying to stand, failing, eyes wild with pain. Sarah saw it too. Her face went white. "We have to help her." "We will." Ethan pulled his pistol. One shot, quick and clean. The horse's suffering ended. The echo of that gunshot rang through the pass for what felt like forever. When it finally faded, the silence was worse. "They'll have heard that," Sarah whispered. "I know." "How far behind are they?" "Close enough." Ethan pulled supplies off the dead horse, redistributing weight to his. "We ride together now. My horse can carry us both for a while, but we'll have to walk some." Sarah looked back the way they had come. In the moonlight, Ethan could see the fear in her eyes. Not fear for herself, fear that they would fail, that those children would stay trapped forever. Will they catch us? She asked. Not if we're smart and lucky. They rode double for the next hour, Ethan's horse straining under the extra weight but holding steady. Good animal. Margaret had picked him out 7 years ago, said he had heart. She was right about that, like she was right about most things. When the terrain got too steep, they dismounted and walked, leading the animal carefully over ice-slick rocks. The wind picked up, howling through the pass like something alive and angry. That's when they heard it. A child crying. Sarah stopped dead. Did you hear that? Ethan did. The sound came again. Weak, distant, but unmistakable. A child in distress. We have to find them, Sarah said. Sarah, we don't have time. Drake could be right behind us, and every minute we delay puts us at risk. I don't care, her voice was wrapped in steel. If there's a child out here alone in this cold, we're not leaving them. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her they had to think strategically, had to stay focused on the mission. But he looked at her face and saw something he recognized. The same look Margaret used to get. The look that said no amount of logic would change her mind because some things were more important than survival. All right, he said, but we're fast, in and out. They followed the crying sound off the main path into a cluster of rocks that formed a natural shelter. Snow had drifted against the stones, creating a small cave barely visible unless you knew to look for it. And there, huddled against the back wall, shivering so hard Ethan could hear her teeth chatter from 10 feet away, was a little girl. She could not have been more than 9 years old, thin as a rail, wearing nothing but a torn dress that might have once been blue and wooden shoes that had come apart at the seams. Her hands were blue with cold. Her face was streaked with tears that had frozen on her cheeks, creating tiny rivers of ice. Sarah ran to her, wrapped her immediately in the wool coat Ethan had given her earlier. Did not hesitate, did not think, just moved. Emily, Sarah gasped, pulling the child close. Emily, is that you? The girl looked up, eyes unfocused, lips barely able to form words. Sister Sarah, I'm here, sweetheart, I'm here. You're safe now. Ethan knelt beside them, already pulling more blankets from his pack. You know this child? This is Emily Cooper. She was at St. Catherine's, one of the orphans. Mother Beatrice sold her 3 weeks ago. Sarah's voice broke. I thought she was dead. Emily clutched at Sarah's sleeve with hands that could barely grip. They made me work in the dark, digging coal. My hands hurt so bad. The other kids, some of them got sick. Some didn't wake up, so I ran. Waited till the foreman was drunk. And I ran. A coal mine. Mother Beatrice had sold this 9-year-old child to work in a coal mine. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Colder than the snow around them. Colder than any winter he had ever known. This was not just corruption. This was not just greed. This was evil, pure and simple. How long have you been out here? Ethan asked gently, wrapping another blanket around her tiny frame. Don't know. Days, maybe. Tried to find the convent. I couldn't remember which way. Got lost. So cold. So hungry. She was burning with fever. Ethan could feel the heat coming off her, even through the cold air. We need to get her warm, Sarah said. Now, or she won't make it through the night. There's a cave about half a mile from here. I used it when I was trapping years back. It's sheltered, dry. We can build a fire there without too much smoke. Can she walk? Ethan looked at Emily's feet. The wooden shoes were held together with twine. Her toes were black with frostbite. No, I'll carry her. He lifted Emily carefully. She weighed almost nothing. A child this age should have weight, should have the healthy bulk of youth. This was just skin stretched over bird bones. This was what starvation looked like. Hold on tight, Emily. We're going on an adventure. Emily stirred weakly. I don't like adventures anymore. I know, sweetheart, but this one ends with you being safe. I promise. They made it to the cave just as the snow started falling harder. Nature's way of covering their tracks, maybe, or just indifferent to human suffering like it always was. Inside the cave was dry, at least, protected from the wind. The ceiling was low, maybe 6 feet at the highest point, but it opened into a space large enough for the three of them and a small fire. Ethan set Emily down gently on the driest patch of ground he could find. Sarah was already gathering what little dry wood remained near the entrance, left over from Ethan's
When I
last
was your
visit here
age,
2 winters
I
ago.
sat right here
He
by
got a
this
small
fire
fire
and
going.
dreamed of
Had to be
adventures far
careful.
beyond these walls.
Too much smoke and they would give away their position to anyone searching. But without heat, Emily would not survive till morning. The flames caught, small and bright. The wood popped and hissed. Warmth began to spread through the cave. Sarah pulled herbs from the small leather pouch she had taken from Ethan's cabin. Willow bark, yarrow, dried elderflower, and something else Ethan did not recognize. "Where'd you learn herbalism?" he asked, watching her work with practiced hands. "St. Catherine's had an infirmary. Sister Dorothy taught me everything she knew. Said medical knowledge was a form of prayer. That healing the body was as holy as healing the soul." She crushed the willow bark between two flat stones, mixed it with melted snow from Ethan's canteen, made Emily drink it despite the child's protests about the bitter taste. "For the fever," Sarah explained, her voice taking on the calm authority of a healer. "It'll take an hour or so to work, but it should bring her temperature down. The yarrow will help with any infection." She was right. Within an hour, Emily's violent shivers lessened. Her breathing, which had been shallow and rapid, evened out into something more natural. The fever broke, sweat beading on her forehead as her body finally began to heal. Emily fell into a deeper, more restful sleep. Sarah sat back against the cave wall, exhausted. The firelight played across her face, highlighting the hollows under her eyes, the tension in her jaw. Ethan handed her some of the dried venison from his pack. She ate mechanically, staring into the flames like they held answers to questions she had not asked yet. "There are more," she said quietly after a long silence. "More like Emily." "I know." The ledger had 12 names, children sold to the mines near Whitewood. If Emily escaped, maybe others tried too. Maybe they're out there right now, lost, dying. Her voice cracked on the last word. "We can't save them all at once, Sarah." She turned to look at him, and he saw anger flash in her eyes. "Why not?" "Because we'll get ourselves killed trying, and then we save no one. Then Mother Beatrice keeps selling children, and Drake keeps buying them, and the whole rotten system keeps turning. So we just leave them, let them die in the dark while we play legal games. No, we get the ledger, we take it to someone with real authority. We do this legal and proper so it sticks. So Mother Beatrice and Drake and everyone involved goes to prison or hangs. That's how we save all of them. Not just the ones we can reach today, but the ones who will come after. Legal takes time. They might not have time." "I know." And Ethan did. God help him, he knew it was the hardest truth he had learned as a marshal. Sometimes you had to let small evils continue so you could stop the bigger one. Sometimes justice was slow and people suffered while you built your case. Sometimes doing the right thing meant watching people hurt and not being able to help them yet. It never got easier, never got less heavy. Sarah pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped her arms around them. "When you were a marshal, how did you stand it, knowing people needed help and having to wait? Having to build cases while people bled?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, watching Emily sleep, watching the fire burn down to coals, remembering all the times he had made the same calculation Sarah was making now. "I didn't stand it well," he finally said. "That's part of why I'm not a marshal anymore." Then, because she had earned honesty, he told her about Daniel Garrett, about the farmer who was just trying to protect his family from a gang that had threatened them, about how Ethan had misread the situation and drawn too fast, about the 7-year-old girl who watched her father die, about the weight that never lifts no matter how many years pass. When he finished, Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? I made assumptions, saw a man with a gun refusing to cooperate and jumped to conclusions. Didn't ask more questions, didn't try harder to understand, just drew and fired." Sarah shifted closer, not touching, but present in a way that mattered. "You're human, Ethan. Humans fail. We make mistakes. We misjudge. We do our best. And sometimes our best isn't good enough. But what you do after you fail, that's what defines you." She paused. "You could have kept being a marshal, told yourself it was justified, moved on to the next case. Instead, you quit. You punished yourself. You hid up in that mountain like you didn't deserve to live among people anymore. That's not honor, Ethan. That's cowardice, though. The words hit like a physical blow, but they were true, and somehow hearing them from her, they did not feel like condemnation. They felt like release. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with them both. Ethan dozed off, not deep sleep, but that half-aware state where you are resting, but still ready to wake at the first sign of danger. He dreamed of Margaret, of the day they met at St. Catherine's 15 years ago when he was investigating a theft. How she had looked at him with those sharp, knowing eyes and said something that only now made sense. She had been talking about Mother Beatrice even then, trying to fight it from inside the system. When she could not, she had married Ethan and left the convent entirely. Thought maybe that would protect the children she cared for. It had not. And that failure had eaten at her until the day she died. Ethan woke to Sarah shaking his shoulder urgently. "Ethan, someone's coming." He was up instantly, rifle in hand, all traces of sleep gone. "How many?" "I heard horses, at least 3, maybe more, moving slow but steady, searching." Ethan moved to the cave entrance, peered carefully through the gap in the piled snow. Dawn was breaking, gray light filtering through heavy clouds. The world was that strange twilight color where everything looks flat and unreal. And there, maybe 200 yards down the slope, moving through the trees in a loose search pattern, he saw them. 6 riders, all armed. One of them had to be Drake. Ethan recognized his massive frame even at this distance. "They tracked us," Sarah whispered from behind him. "The dead horse, probably. Or the gunshot. Maybe both. Doesn't matter now. What do we do if they find this cave?" "They won't. There's another way out. At the back. Narrow passage carved by water years ago. Leads down to a ravine about a quarter-mile from here. It's tight, but we can make it. And they'll search this cave eventually. When they don't find us, they'll assume we kept moving. Gives us maybe an hour head start. That's not much time. It'll have to do." They woke Emily as gently as they could. She was stronger now, the fever broken, but still weak. Too weak to walk far on her own. Ethan lifted her onto his back. "Hold on tight, Emily. We're going on an adventure." "You promised the last one was the last one," she whispered. "I lied." Despite everything, the child almost smiled. They moved through the narrow passage at the back of the cave. Sarah led with Ethan's knife, cutting through cobwebs, clearing the path. The passage was barely wide enough for Ethan's shoulders. Twice he had to exhale completely and turn sideways just to squeeze through. Emily whimpered once when stone scraped her leg, but she did not cry out. Brave kid, braver than most adults Ethan had known. They emerged into the ravine just as full morning light broke through the clouds. A frozen stream bed stretched before them. Steep walls on both sides rising 30 feet high. The sky above was a thin strip of gray between white cliffs. "Which way?" Sarah asked, scanning both directions. "Downstream, toward Harper's Ferry. It'll add time to our journey, but it's safer than any main path. And we need to get Emily to Marshall Bradshaw." They walked for hours through that ravine, Ethan carrying Emily mostly, Sarah walking ahead, watching for dangers he might miss while focused on the child. Around midday they heard it, faint but unmistakable. Church bells. "Town ahead," Ethan said. "Has to be Harper's Ferry." But as they got closer, climbing out of the ravine and onto higher ground where they could see the valley below, Ethan felt that old lawman's instinct kick in. Something was wrong. The bells were ringing too fast, too urgent, too panicked. That was not the call to Sunday service. That was not marking the hour. That was an alarm. They crested a small hill and looked down on Harper's Ferry spread out below them. Smoke rose from several buildings. People ran through the streets in obvious panic. And in the center of town, clear as day, even from this distance, Ethan saw horses. Armed men on horseback. Too many of them. "Drake got here first," Sarah breathed. "How we left him behind in the pass. He must have split his forces, sent some after us, while others came ahead to cut off our escape. Smart. Ruthless, but smart." Ethan watched the chaos below. His mind worked through possibilities, and none of them good. He saw townspeople being herded toward the church, saw Drake's men going door to door, kicking them open, searching. They were looking for them, and they were willing to tear apart the whole town to find them. "We can't go down there," Sarah said, reaching the same conclusion. "If we do, innocent people will get hurt. Killed, maybe." She was right, but they needed Marshal Helen Bradshaw, needed her authority, her resources. her ability to call in federal help and make arrests that would actually stick. There's another way in, Ethan said, thinking fast. Old Service Road behind the church. Runs along the creek. Helen's office is attached to the courthouse there, if we can reach her without being seen. That's a very big if. You have a better plan. Sarah looked at Emily sleeping in Ethan's arms, then at the town below, then back at Ethan. We split up. You take Emily to Helen, tell her what's happening. I'll create a distraction on the other side of town. Draw Drake's men away from the courthouse. Absolutely not. Ethan, they were looking for a nun and a mountain man traveling together with a child. If we split up, we're harder to identify, harder to track. Emily needs help now, and Helen needs to know what's happening. That's more important than my safety. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her it was foolish, reckless, that she had just escaped slavery and now wanted to walk right back into danger. But he looked at Emily's pale face and Sarah's determined expression, and he knew she was right. What kind of distraction? He asked. Sarah smiled, and there was something dangerous in it, something that reminded him she was not just a victim. She was a survivor, and survivors learn how to fight back. The kind Mother Beatrice taught us, she said, fire and brimstone, righteous fury, and a little bit of chaos. 30 minutes later, Ethan watched from the hillside as Sarah walked boldly into Harper's Ferry's main street. She had changed her appearance fast and efficiently, taken a dress and bonnet from a clothesline outside town, dirt smudged on her face, hair tucked up under the bonnet. She looked nothing like a nun now, just another working woman going about her day. She carried a basket of laundry, played the part perfectly. One of Drake's men stopped her about halfway. Ethan saw him grab her arm roughly, saw her pull back, startled and afraid. The basket spilled, clean laundry scattered across the muddy street. Sarah bent down to pick it up. The man stood over her, saying something Ethan could not hear from this distance. Sarah responded, gesturing, apologizing by the look of it, playing the part of a simple woman caught up in something she did not understand. The man lost interest, moved on, too busy with his search to bother with what looked like a frightened washerwoman. Sarah gathered her washing and continued toward the warehouse district. Near the lumber yard, where stacks of cut timber rose like wooden mountains, where dry wood and sawdust and turpentine created a perfect recipe for disaster. Ethan saw her set down the basket, look around carefully, then pull something from inside her dress. Matches. That's my girl, he whispered. The fire started small, just a corner of one lumber pile smoking. But lumber yards are tinder boxes waiting for a spark. Within 2 minutes, flames were climbing. Within 5, the whole yard was ablaze, sending thick black smoke into the gray sky. Chaos erupted. Drake's men ran toward the fire. Townspeople ran away from it. In the confusion, no one was watching the streets anymore. No one was guarding the courthouse. Ethan picked up Emily and moved fast, staying low, using buildings and smoke as cover. Made it to the back of the church complex, found the side door to the marshal's office, did not bother knocking, kicked it open. Marshal Helen Bradshaw was inside loading rifles with quick, practiced efficiency. She spun around, pistol drawn faster than most men could blink, then lowered it when she saw Ethan. "Stone," she said, not looking up from the rifle she was loading. "Figured you'd be in the middle of this mess." Helen Bradshaw did not look up when Ethan kicked open her door, just kept loading the rifle in her hands with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. When she finally glanced up, there was no surprise in her eyes, just a weariness that came from 20 years of dealing with men like Drake in situations like this. She was 40 years old, hard as railroad spikes with gray streaking through dark hair. She kept pulled back in a tight bun. Her badge caught the light from the window. U.S. Marshal. The real thing, not some bought and paid for deputy like Fletcher. "Stone," she said, "figured you'd be in the middle of this mess. You have a knack for finding trouble." "Helen, we need help, badly." Then she saw Emily in his arms, and her expression shifted instantly, from amused to deadly serious. She set down the rifle and crossed the room in 3 long strides, knelt in front of the child, examining her with the efficiency of someone who had seen too much suffering in her career. "What happened to this child?" Ethan gave her the short version. Mother Beatrice Ashford at St. Catherine's Convent, selling children to coal mines and labor camps. Emily escaped from Black Ridge Mine. At least 30 more still trapped. They had proof, but it was incomplete. They needed the ledger from the convent. He pulled out Drake's signed bill of sale. Helen read it quickly, her expression darkening with each word. Bill of sale for Sister Sarah Mitchell. Human trafficking. William Drake's signature. 40 witnesses in Whitewood. This is solid evidence. But you're right, one transaction doesn't prove a pattern. We need more. There's a ledger at the convent, hidden in Mother Beatrice's office, behind a painting of the Virgin Mary. It has everything, names, dates, prices, buyers, 2 years of transactions. And Sister Sarah Mitchell, the woman named on this paper, where is she? Ethan crossed to the window, looked out at the burning lumberyard and the chaos it had created. Out there right now, created that fire to cover my approach. Helen actually laughed. The nuns set that fire. Like I said, we need help. I like her already. Helen buckled on her gun belt, checked both pistols with quick practice movements. Here's our situation. Drake has 15, maybe 20 men in town. They're terrorizing civilians, searching every building, making threats. That gives me federal jurisdiction. I can arrest him and every man riding with him right now for assault on a federal town. He'll fight. Good. I'm tired of men like William Drake thinking they're above the law. She turned back to Ethan. Here's what we're going to do. My deputies will round up every able-bodied citizen willing to stand with us. We make this Drake's problem, not ours. We show him that good people outnumber bad when they finally get angry enough to act. The door burst open. Sarah stood there covered in soot and ash, breathing hard, eyes bright with adrenaline, very much alive. Sorry I'm late, she said. Had to make sure the fire really took. Didn't want Drake putting it out too quickly. Helen looked between Ethan, Emily, and Sarah, then back at the burning lumberyard visible through the window. You three are either brilliant or completely insane. Sarah smiled slightly. Can it be both? Helen actually laughed again, a real laugh this time. Sister, I definitely like you. Within the hour, word had spread through deputies and trusted citizens. Town meeting at the church, mandatory attendance. Anyone who did not show would be considered an accomplice. By the time the church bells rang again, this time calling people to assembly rather than warning of danger, nearly 200 people had gathered. Farmers with dirt under their fingernails, shopkeepers with ink-stained hands, blacksmiths still wearing leather aprons, washerwomen with raw reddened hands, the honest working backbone of Harper's Ferry. And at the back arms, crossed and faces hard, stood Drake and a dozen of his men, daring anyone to speak against them. Helen stood at the pulpit, badge gleaming in the afternoon light, streaming through the stained glass windows. She let the silence build. Let people settle. Let the weight of the moment press down on everyone. Then she spoke. Folks, I'm going to tell you something that's hard to hear, something that'll make you angry, something that should make you angry. The crowd murmured, uncertain. For years, maybe longer, there's been evil operating in our territory. Evil hiding behind respectability, behind religion, behind the very institutions we're taught to trust. The murmuring grew louder. Helen continued, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Mother Beatrice Ashford, Mother Superior of St. Catherine's Convent, has been selling children. Orphans placed in her care by families who died, by parents who couldn't feed them, by communities who trusted the church to protect the vulnerable. She sold them like livestock, to coal mines, to lumber camps, to anyone who'd pay her price. The crowd erupted, voices raised in shock and anger and disbelief. That's a damned lie, Drake shouted from the back. His voice boomed through the church. This woman's delusional, making up stories. There's no proof of any of this. Helen held up the paper with his signature. Let the silence build again, then spoke with cold contempt. There's plenty of proof, Mr. Drake, starting with this. Bill of sale for a human being. Sister Sarah Mitchell. Sold by you for $1. Signed by you. Witnessed by 40 men in Whitewood 3 days ago. Drake's face went from red to white in an instant. And there's more, Helen said, turning back to the crowd. Sister Sarah Mitchell, formerly of St. Catherine's, discovered a ledger. A record of every transaction. Every child sold. Every price paid. She's here today, willing to testify to what she saw. Sarah stepped forward. She still wore the soot-stained dress, still looked small and fragile, but when she spoke, her voice carried like thunder. I grew up in that convent, she began. The church fell silent, every eye on her. I loved it, loved the sisters, loved the work we did, loved the children we cared for. For years, it was a true sanctuary, a place where the lost found family. She paused, gathering strength. Ethan could see her hands shaking, but her voice never wavered. But 2 years ago, things changed. Mother Beatrice started making children disappear. She'd tell us they'd been adopted, found good families. We wanted to believe her, needed to believe her, because the alternative was too horrible to contemplate. Tears streamed down Sarah's face now, but she kept talking. Then 3 months ago, I was cleaning Mother Beatrice's office, and I found a ledger hidden behind a painting of the Virgin Mary. And I read it. She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. Notes she had made from memory. Names she would never forget. Emily Cooper, 9 years old, sold for $25 to Black Ridge Coal Mine. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Thomas Reed, 11 years old, sold for $30 to Timber Ridge Camp. More gasps. Someone stood up, sat back down. The weight of what she was saying settling over the church like snow. Sarah Finn. A woman in the crowd made a sound. Not quite a scream, not quite a sob, something in between. She stood up so fast her chair fell over. Elizabeth Finn. She ran the general store on Main Street. Everyone knew her, a good woman, honest, hardworking, widowed young but kept the store running, raised her daughter alone until 3 years ago, when she could not afford to feed her anymore, and took her to St. Catherine's. Mother Beatrice had promised to find the girl a good family. Mrs. Finn's face had gone absolutely white. She was shaking. Sarah Finn is my daughter, she said. Her voice broke on the words. Mother Beatrice told me she'd been adopted by a good family in Charleston. Told me Sarah was happy, would write when she got settled. The church went silent. You could hear people breathing. Nothing else. Mrs. Finn's voice rose, edged with a mother's anguish. You're telling me she was sold, that my baby girl was sold like property? Sarah looked at her with such deep compassion it hurt to witness. Yes, ma'am, I'm so sorry. Your daughter's name was in that ledger. $15, sold to a textile mill in Grafton. Mrs. Finn collapsed, just her knees giving out. Her brother caught her, held her while she wept. Around them, other people were standing now, demanding answers, demanding justice, demanding to know if their children, their nieces, their nephews, their neighbors' kids had been among the sold. Drake tried to push toward the door. Helen's deputies blocked his path. 6 men with rifles. They had been waiting for this moment. You're under arrest, Helen said clearly. Her voice cut through the chaos like a church bell. Human trafficking, conspiracy, assault on a federal officer. You're done, Drake. Finished. You have no authority, Drake snarled. But there was fear in his eyes now. Real fear. I have lawyers, connections, money. You can't touch me. I have the law, Helen said simply, which beats money every single time when good people finally decide to enforce it. She turned to address the crowd once more. Let them see her badge. Let them remember what it meant. I can arrest William Drake and every man who rode with him. I can shut down his operations. I can start investigations. But I need help. Mother Beatrice is still free. That ledger is still at St. Catherine's. Without it, a clever lawyer might get Drake released, might get Mother Beatrice off entirely. And those children stay in the mines, in the camps, in the mills. Silence fell over the church. Heavy, weighted, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Then Mrs. Finn stood again. Her face was wet with tears, but her voice was steel. I'll help. Whatever you need, Marshal. Whatever it takes. Her brother stood beside her. Both of us. A farmer near the front stood. His hands were calloused from 40 years of working the land. My nephew works in those mines. If there's children down there suffering, I'm getting them out, today. One by one people stood, 30, 40, 60, 100, until nearly the entire church was standing, united, angry, ready to act. Drake looked around at the sea of faces and finally understood. He had lost. His money meant nothing. His threats meant nothing. His violence meant nothing against this many people who had finally seen the truth and decided to care. Helen smiled grimly. Looks like you're outvoted, Mr. Drake. Democracy is a beautiful thing, isn't it? The arrest happened quickly. Helen and her 6 deputies had Drake and his remaining men in chains within minutes. Some of Drake's hired guns tried to run. They did not get far. Townspeople blocked the exits, blocked the streets, nowhere to go. The town organized itself with surprising speed. Groups formed immediately, some to search Drake's properties for more evidence, some to ride to the mines and camps and demand the children to be released, some to guard the prisoners against any rescue attempt, and some, the strongest and most determined, to ride with them to St. Catherine's Convent to get that ledger and arrest Mother Beatrice. As the sun set, painting the sky blood red and gold, Ethan found Sarah standing outside the church, watching all the activity. People moving with purpose, with unity, something that had not existed an hour ago. "You did good today," Ethan said quietly. "We did good together. I couldn't have done any of this without you." Still, standing up there, telling your story in front of 200 people, that took real courage. Or desperation, or stupidity. She smiled slightly. Sometimes they all look the same. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we finish it. We ride to St. Catherine's tomorrow at first light. We get that ledger. We make absolutely certain Mother Beatrice can never hurt another child. She won't surrender quietly. She's had power too long to give it up without a fight." "Good, I'm tired of talking anyway." Helen approached with 2 fresh horses and a pack of supplies. "Figured you'd need these. Riley's taking care of Emily. Doc Morrison says she'll make a full recovery. Tough kid, tougher than most adults I've known." "How is she?" Sarah asked with obvious concern. "Stronger already. Asking about you, actually. Wants to know if you're really coming back." Helen smiled. "I told her you were. Told her sister Sarah keeps her promises." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I will come back. When this is done, I'm rebuilding St. Catherine's into what it should have been. A real home. A real sanctuary." "Good," Helen said. "World needs more people willing to fix what's broken instead of just walking away." She turned to Ethan. "We ride at dawn. I'm bringing 8 deputies and 20 volunteers from town. Should be more than enough to handle whatever Mother Beatrice has waiting." "She'll know we're coming," Ethan warned. "Drake had time to send word before we caught him." "Let her know. Let her be afraid. Let her understand what's coming for her. She's earned every bit of fear she feels." That night they stayed at the boarding house Helen had secured. Separate rooms, proper and respectable. But sleep would not come. Ethan kept thinking about tomorrow, about facing the place Margaret had loved, the place she had tried to save from the inside, the place that had ultimately killed her, though not in any way that would show up in a coroner's report. Around midnight there was a soft knock on his door. Sarah stood there in a borrowed nightgown, looking young and frightened and determined and all at once. "Can't sleep either?" Ethan asked. She shook her head. "Every time I close my eyes, I see them. All those children still trapped, still suffering, still waiting for someone to save them. We'll save them tomorrow. But what if we're too late? What if something happens and we fail and they stay there forever and it's all my fault because I didn't act sooner, didn't do more, didn't try harder when I first found that ledger?" "Sarah, stop." Ethan's voice was firm but gentle. "We're doing everything we can, everything humanly possible. The rest is up to Boyd or fate or whatever power runs this world." She leaned against the doorframe. "Tomorrow, when we face her, Mother Beatrice, I'm going to have to see her again. Look her in the eye, and I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That I'll want revenge instead of justice. That I'll want to hurt her the way she hurt those children. That I'll want to make her suffer." Ethan understood that feeling, had wrestled with it himself many times. "You know what Margaret told me once," he said. "She said the difference between revenge and justice is who benefits. Revenge makes you feel better for a moment. Justice makes the world better forever." He paused. Let that sink in. "So when you're facing Mother Beatrice tomorrow, ask yourself what makes the world better. Your satisfaction or her punishment under law." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything, for saving me, for believing me, for helping me become more than just a victim. Thank me when it's over. No, I thank you now. Because tomorrow's not promised. And I want you to know that meeting you even in the worst moment of my life was a gift. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Faith, not just in God, though that too. Faith in people. Faith that there's still good in this world worth fighting for. Faith that one person can make a difference. She turned to go back to her room, paused at the threshold, looked back. Ethan, when this is over, when Mother Beatrice is in prison and the children are safe and justice has been served, what will you do? Will you go back to your mountain? Ethan thought about his cabin, about 6 months of silence and solitude, about hiding from a world that had disappointed him, about punishing himself for failures that could not be undone. I don't know, he admitted. What about you? I think I'll stay at St. Catherine's. Help rebuild it into what it was supposed to be from the beginning, a true sanctuary, a real home for children who have nowhere else. Maybe I can make Margaret's dream real. That's good work, important work. Someone has to do it. Might as well be someone who knows exactly how broken it was. She smiled then, soft and sharp and hopeful, all mixed together in a way that reminded him so much of Margaret it hurt. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Sarah. He closed the door and lay back on the bed. This time, somehow, sleep came easier. Tomorrow they would face Mother Beatrice. Tomorrow they would end this nightmare. But tonight, just for these few hours, he let himself believe that maybe they were making the world a little bit better. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Dawn broke cold and clear over Harper's Ferry, the kind of morning where every breath creates clouds and the frost on the windows looks like angels' wings. Beautiful and deadly all at once. 29 riders gathered in the street, Helen and 8 deputies at the front, 20 volunteers from town in the middle. Ethan and Sarah rode with Helen at the lead, not an army, but enough. As they rode out, people lined the streets. Some waved, some prayed, some just stood silent, bearing witness to something they hoped would matter. Emily was there, standing with Doc Morrison's wife, her small hand raised in a wave. Sarah waved back, wiping away tears. We're coming back. I promise, Rishi. Emily called out, her voice clear and strong despite everything she had been through. I know. You keep your promises. The ride to St. Catherine's took 6 hours. They pushed the horses hard but not cruel, could not afford to arrive on exhausted mounts. The landscape changed as they climbed into the mountains. The forest grew denser, the air grew colder, the silence grew heavier. This was Margaret's country. She had grown up in these mountains, knew every trail, every stream, every hidden hollow. When she married Ethan and left the convent, she used to say she was taking the mountains with her, that they were in her blood and bones and could not be left behind even if she wanted to. Ethan understood that now. Around noon, they stopped to rest the horses and eat. Cold food, dried meat, and hard bread. No fires. Did not want to announce their approach. Helen asked Sarah about the layout. Sarah pulled out a piece of paper and sketched quickly. She had a good hand, precise and clear. The convent built around a central courtyard. Main chapel facing east. Living quarters for the sisters on the north side. Orphanage dormitories on the south. Mother Beatrice's office in the administrative building on the west side. Second floor. Corner room. The ledger is in her office, Sarah said, marking an X on the sketch, hidden behind a painting of the Virgin Mary. There's a false wall. The painting swings out on hinges. The ledger is in a locked metal box behind it. Security, Helen asked. Used to be just one groundskeeper, old man named Thomas, harmless. But if Mother Beatrice knows we're coming, she might have hired protection. How many ways in 4 main gates? North, south, east, west. The east gate is the formal entrance. Always locked at night. The west gate leads to the kitchen gardens, usually open during day. North and south gates are for deliveries. Locked unless wagons are coming. Secret ways in Sarah hesitated. There's a drainage culvert under the north wall. Opens into the root cellar beneath the kitchen. Sister Dorothy and I used to sneak out that way when we were novices, to see the stars without the abbess knowing. Helen smiled slightly. Even nuns break rules, especially young ones. Could we fit through this culvert? One at a time. It's tight, but yes. Helen studied the sketch, her mind working through tactics and probabilities. Here's what we do. Main force comes in the front gate, loud, official. Demands entry with arrest warrant. While Mother Beatrice is focused on that, a smaller team goes through the culvert, secures the ledger before she can destroy it. I'll go through the culvert, Sarah said immediately. Sarah, that's too dangerous, Ethan started. I know the layout. I know where the ledger is exactly. Every hallway, every turn. I can get it faster than anyone else. She's right, Helen said. But she doesn't go alone. Stone, you go with her, 2 deputies as backup, Johnson and Martinez. Good men, steady. The rest of us make noise at the front. They reached the ridge overlooking St. Catherine's as the sun was setting. The convent sat in a valley below, stone walls glowing golden in the fading light. From this distance, it looked peaceful, holy, like the sanctuary it was supposed to be. But Ethan knew better now. Sarah pointed. Smoke from 3 chimneys. Main hall kitchen and Mother Beatrice's private quarters. That means she's here. Helen raised her spyglass. I see movement. Guards on the walls. At least 4. Armed with rifles. She's definitely expecting trouble. How do we handle them? Carefully, we're not here to start a war. We announce ourselves, give her a chance to surrender. If she refuses or if her guards open fire, then we respond. They waited until full dark. No moon tonight, just stars in the dim glow of lamps from within the convent walls. Helen split them into 2 groups. She took 23 riders to the main gate. Ethan took Sarah and 2 deputies through the forest toward the north wall. As they separated, Helen gripped Ethan's shoulder. Get that ledger, Stone. Whatever it takes, that's the key to everything. I know. And keep the sister safe. I like her. World needs more people like her. I'll do my best. Your best is usually good enough. They moved through the forest like ghosts. Sarah led the way, sure-footed even in darkness. She knew these woods from childhood. The north wall loomed up, 15 feet of mortared stone topped with iron spikes, meant to keep the world out, or maybe to keep the residents in. There, Sarah whispered, pointing to a dark opening near the base of the wall, the drainage culvert, barely 3 feet wide, maybe 2 feet tall. They would have to crawl. Ethan went first, on his belly, rifle strapped to his back, pulling himself forward with his elbows. The culvert smelled of old water and rot and something else. Fear, maybe, or just his imagination working overtime. After 20 feet that felt like 20 miles, he emerged into the root cellar. Dark, cold, shelves lined with jars of preserved vegetables and salted meat. A door at the far end presumably leading to the kitchen. Sarah came through next, then Johnson, then Martinez, all of them breathing hard, covered in mud and worse. Now what? Johnson whispered. Sarah pointed up. Stairs behind that door lead to the kitchen. From there, servants' hallway to the main building. Mother Beatrice's office is on the 2nd floor. Guards. There shouldn't be any inside, but I can't be certain. Ethan checked his pistol. We move quiet. Anyone we meet, we detain. Don't hurt unless we have to. The goal is the ledger, nothing else. They moved up the stairs. The door was unlocked, opened into the kitchen. Dark and empty. Embers glowed in the large fireplace, providing just enough light to see by. Sarah led them through. She moved with certainty, muscle memory guiding her through a space she had navigated thousands of times. The servants' hallway was narrow and plain, none of the religious artwork that decorated the public spaces, just bare stone and worn wood. They reached the main building without incident, started up the stairs to the 2nd floor. That's when they heard it, voices coming from above. They froze. Mother Beatrice's voice, cold, imperious. I don't care what it costs. Burn it. Burn all of it. The ledger, the correspondence, everything. By morning, there should be no evidence I was ever involved in anything improper. Another voice, male, rough. What about the federal marshal? She's at the gate right now with 30 men. Let her wait. By the time they break through, everything will be ash. And I'll be the grieving Mother Superior whose orphanage tragically burned while she tried to save the children. Ethan's blood went cold. Sarah's face had gone white. She's going to burn the evidence and blame us for it. Not if we get there first. They move faster now. Caution sacrificed for speed. Up the stairs, down the hallway toward the corner office where lamplight spilled under the door. Ethan kicked it open. Mother Beatrice stood by her desk holding the ledger. A small brazier burned beside her, flames already consuming papers. She was dressed in full formal habit, every inch the pious leader. But her eyes. Her eyes were cold and calculating and completely void of anything resembling grace. "Sister Sarah," she said calmly, "I wondered if you'd be foolish enough to return." "Put down the ledger," Ethan said, rifle aimed at her chest. "Or what? You'll shoot an unarmed woman of God in her own office that will look wonderful at your trial, Mr. Stone. Put it down, now." Mother Beatrice smiled. It was the cruelest expression Ethan had ever seen on a human face. "You self-righteous fools. You think you're saving children. You're condemning them. Those mines, those camps, those mills. They put food in bellies and roofs over heads. I gave those orphans purpose, work, a reason to exist. What would you have me do? Keep them here to starve, to die of disease, to grow up useless and unwanted." "You sold them like property," Sarah said, her voice shaking with rage. "For money, for your gambling debts, for your own greed. I did what was necessary to keep this institution running. The church provides no funding. The community provides no support. I had to be resourceful." "You're a monster." Mother Beatrice's expression hardened. "I'm a pragmatist, something you never had the stomach for, Sarah. You always were too soft, too sentimental. That's why I chose you to sell. At least you'd fetch a decent price with your looks and education." Sarah lunged forward. Ethan caught her arm. "Don't. She wants you angry, wants you to do something stupid. Don't give her the satisfaction." Mother Beatrice moved toward the brazier, ledger in hand. "I think we're done here. Officers, arrest these intruders for trespassing and assault." Two large men emerged from the shadows behind them. Hired muscle. Johnson and Martinez turned to face them. Ethan kept his rifle on Mother Beatrice. She held the ledger over the flames. "One movement in 30 children's last chance at justice becomes ash." Standoff. Then Sarah spoke, her voice calm now, deadly calm. "Reverend Samuel wrote letters to the diocese, to Rome, documenting his suspicions about you. They're in a safe deposit box in Charleston, to be opened if anything happens to him." Mother Beatrice hesitated. "And Sister Dorothy kept her own records," Sarah continued. "Every child who disappeared, every family you lied to, every time you claimed adoption when you really meant sale. She's been documenting your crimes for 2 years. That evidence is all ready with Marshal Bradshaw." Ethan did not know if Sarah was bluffing or telling the truth, but it was brilliant either way. Mother Beatrice's hand wavered. "You're lying." "Am I? You taught us yourself, Mother. Always keep backups, always have insurance." "Did you really think we'd put all our faith in one ledger?" The moment of hesitation was all Ethan needed. He fired, not at Mother Beatrice, at the brazier. The shot went through the metal, tipping it over, spilling burning coals across the stone floor. Mother Beatrice jumped back with a shriek. Sarah darted forward, grabbed the ledger from her hands. The hired muscle moved. Johnson and Martinez met them. The fight was brief and brutal. These were young deputies who had grown up working farms, built strong from hard labor. The hired guns were city men, soft from easy living. It was over in less than a minute. Ethan kept his rifle trained on Mother Beatrice. "You're under arrest, human trafficking, fraud, conspiracy, child endangerment. You want me to keep going?" She drew herself up, trying to maintain dignity. "You have no authority here. This is church property. You're trespassing. Federal marshal outside with a warrant says different." They heard it then, shouting from outside, the main gates opening. Helen and her forces had made it through. Within minutes, the office was full of people. Helen, her deputies, several volunteers, including Mrs. Elizabeth Finn. Helen took one look at the scene and nodded approvingly. "Got the ledger." Sarah held it up. Helen turned to Mother Beatrice. "Mother Beatrice Ashford, you are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt you will. You'll be transported to federal custody in Charleston to await trial." "This is outrageous. I demand to speak with my lawyer." "You'll get that chance, right after we inventory every piece of evidence in this office." It took 3 hours to process everything. The ledger was just the beginning. Letters, contracts, bank statements, Mother Beatrice had kept meticulous records of her crimes, probably never believing anyone would dare look. Her arrogance had created the very evidence that would convict her. As dawn broke, they led her out in chains. The other sisters watched from windows, some crying, some angry, some just shocked. The world they had believed in had been a lie. Sister Dorothy was there. She ran to Sarah, embraced her. "I'm so sorry. I should have done more. Should have stopped her." "You did what you could," Sarah said gently. "We all did. Now we make sure it never happens again." The ride back to Harper's Ferry took most of the day. Mother Beatrice rode in a prison wagon, silent and cold. Drake was already in custody there. Soon they would both face a judge and jury. When they rode into Harper's Ferry 3 days after they had left, the town turned out to greet them. News had spread fast about the arrests, about the rescued children, about justice finally being served. Emily was there, standing with Doc Morrison's wife. When she saw Sarah, she broke free and ran. Sarah dismounted and caught her, lifting her up, spinning her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. "You came back," Emily said. "I promised, didn't I? Are they all safe now? All the other kids?" "They will be. It'll take time, but they will be." Ethan watched the scene, thought about the dollar he had paid 6 months ago. Best dollar he ever spent. Not because he had saved Sarah, but because she had saved him right back. Saved him from solitude, from guilt, from a life lived in shadows. She had reminded him what Margaret had always known, that one person can make a difference, that small acts of courage add up, that justice is worth fighting for, especially when it's hard. November 1919, the cabin, night 2. The fire burned low. Thomas sat forward in his chair, eyes wide, completely absorbed in the story. And then what, grandfather? They had the arrests, but did Mother Beatrice go to prison? Did the children all get saved? Ethan, 58 years old now, took a slow drink of whiskey, smiled slightly. "That's a story for tomorrow night, Thomas. For now, let me tell you what I learned that day in Harper's Ferry, when 200 people stood up in that church." He stood, added wood to the fire. "When you face evil, and you will in war or after it, you have to choose between revenge and justice. Between what makes you feel better and what makes the world better." He placed his hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Always choose the world, even when it's bitter, even when it's slow, even when every part of you wants revenge. Because that's the difference between a man and someone who used to be good but let darkness win." Thomas nodded seriously. "I understand, grandfather." "Good, now sleep. Tomorrow night I'll tell you how it all ended, and how sometimes an ending is just a beginning." Thomas climbed to the loft. Ethan sat alone, looking into the fire, thinking about 30 years ago, about the night before they rode to St. Catherine's, about Sarah and the faith she had restored, about Margaret and the dream they would fulfill. He took another drink of whiskey, whispered to the flames, "We did good, Margaret. We did it right. And tomorrow I'll tell our grandson how it all ended." The fire flickered. The snow fell outside. And in the silence of that cabin, Ethan felt something he had not felt in years. Peace. November 1919, Appalachian Mountains, West Virginia. Night 3. The fire in the cabin burned steady. 3 nights of storytelling had worn the woodpile down, but there was still enough to last through this final night. Ethan Stone sat in Margaret's chair, the one she had loved because it faced the hearth just right. Thomas sat across from him, 17 years old and no longer restless. The boy had learned patience over these 3 nights. Learned to listen, learned that some stories cannot be rushed. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The world lay silent under its white blanket. Inside, whiskey warmed their throats, and firelight painted shadows that danced like memories across rough, wooden walls. Thomas leaned forward. He had been waiting all day for this moment. "Grandfather, I couldn't sleep last night. Kept thinking about the story, about Sister Sarah and Emily, about Mother Beatrice and Drake. Did they get punished? Did the children get saved?" Ethan poured 2 cups of whiskey, slid one across to Thomas. The boy took it without hesitation. 3 nights of his grandfather's stories had aged him somehow, made him ready for harder truths. "You know what the hardest thing about justice is, Thomas?" The boy shook his head. "It's not fighting for it, not the risk, not the danger. The hardest thing is not knowing if it'll be enough. If one person, one action, one decision can really change anything. He paused, looked into the fire like it held answers he was still searching for 30 years later. Margaret used to say something. She'd tell me, when you save one soul, you save the world. I didn't understand it then. Thought it was just pretty words, a metaphor. His voice grew softer. Took me 30 years to realize she meant it literally. What do you mean? Let me tell you the rest. About the trial. About what Sarah taught me about forgiveness. And about how $1 bought more than one woman's freedom. He took a drink, let the burn settle. Then his eyes went distant. The cabin walls faded, and he was there again. December 1889 turning into January 1890. The weeks between arrest and trial. The firelight seemed to brighten, and Ethan was young again, watching justice grind slowly forward while children suffered and waited for rescue that could not come fast enough. 6 weeks after the arrests, January 1890, the weeks between Mother Beatrice's arrest and her trial moved like cold molasses. Every day felt like a year, every hour stretched thin enough to break. But Helen Bradshaw was methodical. She did not rush, could not afford to. This case had to be airtight. No room for clever lawyers to find loopholes. No chance for appeals to overturn convictions. So she worked, and Ethan worked with her and Sarah, and a growing number of people who had finally seen the truth and refused to look away. Federal marshals from 3 states descended on every location in the ledger: mines, lumber camps, textile mills, anywhere children had been sold. Some owners surrendered peacefully, handed over the children without argument once they saw federal badges and warrants. Others fought. 2 mine supervisors were killed resisting arrest. 3 more fled and remained at large. But one by one the operations were shut down. One by one children were freed. They came in waves. 12 from Black Ridge Mine, Emily's friends, ages 6 to 14, malnourished, injured, traumatized. 8 from Timber Ridge Camp, survivors of logging accidents, missing fingers, broken bones. 15 from various mills and workshops, textile workers, some death from machinery noise, chemical burns on their hands. Each one needed medical care. Doc Morrison worked around the clock. The church opened its doors. Families volunteered foster homes. The town of Harper's Ferry, which had stood silent for so long, suddenly could not do enough. Sarah spent those weeks coordinating care, preparing testimony, writing her statement 17 times, each draft clearer, more focused, more devastating in its simple truth. Ethan helped Helen track witnesses, travel to interview families, gather evidence, build the case brick by careful brick. By the time the trial began, they had documentation 3 feet high, testimony from 47 witnesses, physical evidence from a dozen locations, the kind of case prosecutors dream about. Unbreakable. January 1890, Federal Courthouse, Charleston, West Virginia. The courthouse was new, built just 5 years earlier with limestone that gleamed white in winter sun. 3 stories tall with columns out front that were meant to inspire confidence in justice. On trial days it did. When the gavel fell and verdicts were read, you could almost believe the law meant something. Judge Marcus Whitmore presided. He was 60 years old, white-haired, known for being fair, known for showing no mercy to corruption. The perfect judge for this case. The courtroom was packed. Victims, families, reporters from newspapers as far away as New York and Boston. This case had captured national attention. The nun selling children, the mountain man who saved them, the marshal who brought them all to justice. It made good copy. But for those who lived it, who bled for it, who lost years of childhood to it, this was not a story. This was their lives, their trauma. Their one chance at seeing the people who hurt them face consequences. Mother Beatrice sat at the defendant's table wearing civilian clothes. No habit. The church had stripped her of that right the day after her arrest. She looked smaller somehow, less imposing. Without the robes and authority of her position, she was just an old woman facing the ruin of everything she had built. William Drake sat at a separate table. His lawyer had tried to get separate trials. Judge Whitmore denied it. These crimes were connected. These criminals would face justice together. The prosecution took 3 days to present its case. Day 1 was documentation. The ledger, bank records, witness statements from the 40 men who had watched Drake sell Sarah in Whitewood, bills of sale, contracts, every piece of paper that proved the conspiracy. Day two was adult witnesses, families who had trusted Mother Beatrice with their children only to discover they had been sold. Mine owners who testified about buying child labor through Drake. Foremen who described working conditions so brutal that grown men would not last a week. Day three was the children, 23 of them in total, each one taking the stand, each one telling their truth. Emily Cooper went first. She wore a new dress donated by Mrs. Finn, clean, pressed, but it could not hide how thin she was, how the memory of starvation had carved hollows into her face that would take months to fill. She had to stand on a box to reach the microphone. Her voice was clear, strong, braver than most adults Ethan had known. They made me dig coal, she said, in the dark, for 12 hours, sometimes more. My hands hurt so bad, I cried. But if you cried, they hit you. So I learned not to cry. The courtroom was silent. You could hear people breathing, nothing else. Kids got sick down there. The air was bad, made you cough, made your lungs hurt. Some kids got crushed when tunnels collapsed. They'd bury them in unmarked graves and tell Mother Beatrice they ran away. Her voice did not waver, did not break. She had survived too much to fall apart now. I ran because I saw my friend die. She was 7. A tunnel caved in, crushed her. The foreman laughed and said, "That's what happens to careless workers." So that night, when he was drunk, I ran. Defense counsel tried to cross-examine, tried to suggest she was confused, misremembering, that a child's testimony could not be trusted. Emily looked at him with eyes that had seen more darkness than he ever would. I remember everything. Every day, every hour, every kid who died. I'll remember for the rest of my life. And you can't make me forget just because it's convenient for you. The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Whitmore banged his gavel but did not reprimand anyone. Some things deserved applause. Sarah Finn testified next, Mrs. Finn's daughter, 15 years old now, reunited with her mother, but carrying scars that would take years to heal. I worked in a textile mill, she said. Her voice was quieter than Emily's, more damaged. 14-hour days, 6 days a week. The machines were so loud. After the first year, I couldn't hear right anymore. The noise did something to my ears. She showed the jury her hands, scarred from machinery accidents, missing part of her left index finger. The supervisor said we were lucky to have jobs, said we should be grateful. But they locked the doors during shifts, said it was to keep us from being lazy. But really, it was so we couldn't run away. She looked at Mother Beatrice, the woman who had promised her mother that Sarah would find a good family, that she would be safe, that she would write letters. You told my mother I was adopted. You told her I was happy. You lied. And she believed you because she trusted the church, trusted you, and you sold me for $15 like I was livestock. Her voice finally broke on those last words, but she kept going, kept testifying, because some truths have to be spoken even when it hurts. Thomas Reed took the stand, 11 years old, small for his age. Lumber camp work had stunted his growth, but his mind was sharp, his memory perfect. I saw a boy die at the camp, he said, his voice flat, emotionless, the way people sound when they have to disconnect to survive telling their story. His name was James. He was 9. A tree fell wrong, crushed him. The foreman said it was his fault for standing in the wrong place. They buried him that night. No marker, no prayer, just a hole in the ground. 23 children, 23 testimonies, each one worse than the last, each one driving home the systematic nature of what had been done. This was not a few isolated incidents. This was industrial-scale child trafficking disguised as religious charity. By the time the last child finished testifying, there was not a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the judge had to pause, wipe his glasses, compose himself before continuing. Sarah Mitchell was called last, the nun who had discovered the ledger, who had risked everything to expose the truth, who had been sold herself and somehow found the strength to fight back. She walked to the stand with quiet dignity, wore a simple dress, hair pulled back, no artifice, no performance, just truth. The prosecutor led her through the story, finding the ledger, being drugged, waking in Drake's wagon, the auction, everything that happened after. Then he asked the question everyone had been waiting for. Miss Mitchell, how did you feel when you discovered what Mother Beatrice had been doing? Sarah was quiet for a moment, looking at her hands, then up at the jury. Betrayed, I loved St. Catherine's. It was my home, my family. I believed we were doing God's work, protecting children who had nowhere else to go. And then I learned that the person leading us, the person we trusted completely, was selling those same children for profit. Did you consider staying silent? For about 5 minutes, she almost smiled. Then I realized that staying silent made me complicit, that my comfort was less important than those children's lives. So I decided to speak up, even though I knew it would cost me everything. Defense counsel stood to cross-examine. Drake's lawyer, a slick man from Charleston who wore expensive suits and thought money could buy anything. Miss Mitchell, isn't it true you harbor a personal grudge against Mother Beatrice? That this is revenge, not justice? Sarah looked at him calmly. I don't want revenge. I want those children safe. I want Mother Beatrice unable to hurt anyone else. I want the law to work the way it's supposed to. If that's revenge, then yes, I'm guilty. The courtroom burst into applause again. This time Judge Whitmore let it go on for a full minute before calling for order. The defense tried. They put forth arguments about misunderstandings, about Mother Beatrice trying to find employment, not selling children, about Drake being a simple labor broker, about how the nuns and orphans had consented to their placements. The jury was not buying it. The evidence was too overwhelming, the testimony too consistent, the documentation too complete. After 4 hours of deliberation, they returned. Guilty, all charges, both defendants unanimous. Mother Beatrice showed no emotion, just sat there, cold, still, like she had carved herself from ice and could not melt no matter what heat was applied. Drake tried to shout, had to be restrained. Dragged from the courtroom, still yelling about lawyers and appeals and how they could not do this to him. But they could, and they did. Sentencing came a week later. Judge Whitmore looked at both defendants with something approaching contempt. In my 20 years on this bench, I have never seen crimes more calculating or cruel. You preyed upon the most vulnerable. You sold children like property in a nation that fought a war to end that very practice. You betrayed every trust placed in you. He turned to Mother Beatrice. You hid behind religious authority, used the church as cover for your crimes, exploited faith that good people placed in institutions they were taught to trust. For that, you deserve no mercy. Mother Beatrice Ashford, I sentence you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. You will spend the rest of your days in federal prison. And I hope that in that time you find something approaching remorse. She did not react, did not speak, just stared ahead at nothing. Judge Whitmore turned to Drake. William Drake, your crimes are equally heinous. You profited from the suffering of children. You enabled this system. You are in every sense that matters a slave trader. And the law is clear about what happens to slave traders. I sentence you to death by hanging, sentenced to be carried out 60 days from today. Drake did react to that, started shouting again, had to be dragged out, his voice echoing through the courthouse until heavy doors cut it off. Deputy Robert Fletcher, who had cooperated and testified against both defendants, received a reduced sentence, 10 years. He would serve every day of it. It was over. Justice, imperfect and slow as always, had finally been served. 1 week after sentencing, Sarah asked Helen for permission to visit Mother Beatrice in prison. Helen looked at her like she was insane. Why would you want to do that? I need to. Sarah, that woman sold you, almost got you killed, put you through hell. You don't owe her anything. I know, but I need to do this for me, not for her. Ethan offered to go with her. Sarah shook her head. This is something I have to do alone. So Helen arranged it, signed the paperwork, got the prison warden's approval. Sarah went on a cold February morning. The prison was 20 miles outside Charleston. Gray stone walls, guard towers, iron gates that clanged shut with the finality of judgment. She was led to a visiting room, small, bare, a table and 2 chairs, Bars on the window. Mother Beatrice sat on one side wearing gray prison clothes. She looked diminished, like someone had let the air out of her. They sat in silence for a long moment, guards outside, watching through a window, ready to intervene if needed. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I came to tell you something." Mother Beatrice looked up. Her eyes held something that might have been shame, or maybe just exhaustion. "What? I forgive you." Those three words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. Mother Beatrice stared at her. "What did you say?" "I forgive you for selling me, for betraying us, for hurting those children. For all of it, I forgive you." "Why?" The word came out strangled, confused. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "No," Sarah agreed, "you don't. But I deserve to give it. I refuse to let you steal my soul twice. You took my freedom once. I won't let you take my peace." Mother Beatrice's face crumpled. For the first time since her arrest, she cried. Real tears, ugly and raw and human. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "God help me, I'm sorry." Sarah stood to leave, paused at the door, looked back one last time. "I hope you find peace, Mother, I really do. Because carrying hate only hurts the person doing the carrying. And I'm done carrying anything that belongs to you." She walked out, did not look back, did not need to. Later, when Ethan asked what Mother Beatrice had said, Sarah told him about the tears, about the apology. "Do you believe she meant it?" Ethan asked. "I don't know, and it doesn't matter. Forgiveness isn't for her, it's for me. Justice made the world better, but mercy freed me from the weight of carrying that hurt forever." Ethan understood then what Margaret had tried to teach him all those years ago, that justice and mercy were not opposites. They were partners. Justice made systems fair. Mercy made hearts whole. You needed both. 6 months later, summer 1890, the world kept turning, as it always does, indifferent to human suffering and human triumph alike. By summer, the immediate crisis had passed. The children had been placed, most with families, a few in new, carefully monitored orphanages. Emily stayed with Doc Morrison and his wife. They adopted her formally, gave her a real home, a real family, a chance at the childhood that had been stolen. Sarah Finn reconciled with her mother, slowly, painfully, but real. Mrs. Finn sold her general store, moved to be near her daughter. They were learning how to be family again. It would take time, but they had time now. Thomas Reed was adopted by a farmer and his wife who had lost their own son to illness. They gave him space, patience, love. He was learning to smile again, learning that not all adults were cruel. The other children scattered to new homes, new lives, new chances, and Sarah Mitchell returned to St. Catherine's. The church had appointed Reverend Samuel as temporary administrator. He was a good man, honest, kind, everything Mother Beatrice had pretended to be. He asked Sarah to help rebuild, to transform the convent into what Margaret had always wanted it to be, a true sanctuary, a real home for children who had nowhere else to go. Sarah accepted. Ethan visited her there 6 months after the trial, rode up through mountains that Margaret had loved, past trees she had climbed as a child, along trails she had walked as a young nun before she met him and changed both their lives. The convent looked different already. The oppressive silence was gone, replaced with something lighter. Children played in the courtyard, actually played, with laughter and running and the chaos of youth unafraid. Sister Dorothy ran the day-to-day operations, efficient and kind in equal measure. Reverend Samuel provided spiritual guidance, and Sarah taught the children. Not just reading and writing, but critical thinking, how to question authority, how to stand up for themselves, how to recognize when someone in power was abusing that power. She was teaching them to never be victims again. Emily Cooper was there. She had decided to stay, to help the younger children. "I remember what it felt like to be scared," she said. "Want to make sure no kid here ever feels that way." Sarah met Ethan in the garden, the same garden Margaret had tended years ago, where she had grown herbs for medicine and vegetables for the kitchen. Sarah had planted roses along one wall, red and white, symbols of love and purity. "How's the work?" Ethan asked. "Hard, good. We're taking in more children than we can really handle. The diocese keeps sending us cases, kids from all over who need a safe place. You need help. Always, why Bushcombe? Ethan explained his idea, something Helen and he had been discussing for weeks, creating a network, safe houses like St. Catherine's in other counties, other states, places where children escaping bad situations could find refuge. Federal marshals would coordinate transport and investigations. Sarah's eyes lit up. That's brilliant. That's exactly what's needed. We'll need people to run them, people with experience, people who understand what these kids have been through. You're offering me a job, Ethan Stone, more like asking you to expand what you're already doing, keep St. Catherine's, but help us build more, train others, share what you've learned. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Margaret would have loved this idea, a network of protection, a safety net. She would have, probably would have told us we took too long to think of it. She would have been right. They walked through the garden together, past herbs that would become medicine, past vegetables that would feed hungry children, past roses that bloomed despite everything. I still think about that day, Sarah said, when you paid $1 for me, when you could have walked away and done nothing. Everything that's happened since, all the children we've saved, it all started with that choice. You made choices too, Ethan reminded her. Every step. You could have stayed silent, stayed hidden, stayed safe. You didn't. We made choices together. That's why it worked. They stopped by a small stone marker, Margaret's grave, moved here from Ethan's mountain with the church's permission. I talk to her sometimes, Sarah admitted. Tell her about the children, about what we're doing. I hope she can hear. If anyone can, it's Margaret. She was never good at staying quiet. Sarah laughed. As the sun set painting the sky in golds and purples and reds, they stood together in that garden. Two survivors, two warriors, two people who had learned that the smallest act of defiance, the simplest choice to do right when wrong, was easier, could change everything. November 1919, the cabin. Night 3. The fire burned low. Ethan added more wood, let the flames climb higher. Thomas sat on the edge of his chair, absorbed, changed somehow by 3 nights of storytelling. So they won, Thomas said quietly. The children got saved. The bad people went to prison. They did. Mother Beatrice died in prison 10 years ago. Drake was hanged as sentenced. Justice was served. And Sister Sarah St. Catherine's, Ethan smiled. Not just St. Catherine's anymore. That network we started, it grew. 47 safe houses now across 7 states. Sarah trained over 200 caregivers. Conservative estimate says we've saved more than 3,000 children in 30 years. Thomas's eyes widened. 3,000 all because you paid $1. $1 for Sarah's freedom. But what she gave me back was worth infinitely more. He stood, crossed to the window, looked out at snow that had started falling again, soft, gentle, like the world was being made clean. Sarah taught me what Margaret had tried to teach me all along, that one person matters, that small acts of courage add up, that justice is worth fighting for, especially when it's hard. He turned back to Thomas. Tomorrow you board that train to war. You'll see terrible things. Face choices no 17-year-old should have to make. You'll be called to do things you know are wrong or stand up for what's right. His voice grew stronger, clearer. When that moment comes, and it will come, remember this. One soul. Save one soul, you save the world. Don't ever think you're too small to matter. Don't ever think one act of courage is too small to make a difference. He moved to his coat hanging by the door, reached into the pocket, pulled out a small leather pouch, crossed back to Thomas, placed it in the boy's hands. Open it. Thomas untied the cord, reached inside, pulled out a single silver dollar coin. Old, worn, but still bright as the firelight. What is this? That's the dollar, the one I paid for Sarah 30 years ago? Thomas stared at it. But how? I thought Drake kept it. Sarah found it years later, in Drake's possessions after he was executed. She gave it to me, told me to give it to someone who needed to remember that one soul is worth everything. He closed Thomas's fingers around the coin. Now I'm giving it to you. Take it with you. When you're out there, and you see someone who needs help, don't think, I'm just one person, what can I do? Think this, if I save one, I save the world. Thomas tucked the coin into his uniform pocket, over his heart where it would stay warm and safe. I won't forget grandfather, I promise. They embraced, old man and young, one generation passing wisdom to the next. Good, because the world needs people like you, people who know the value of a soul, people willing to fight for what's right even when it costs something. Thomas climbed to the loft. Ethan sat alone by the fire. He raised his cup of whiskey, spoke to the flames, to Margaret, to Sarah, to all those who had taught him. We did good. We did it right. And now our grandson will carry it forward. We'll keep fighting. We'll save his own soul, and through that save the world. The fire flickered and danced. The snow fell soft outside. And in the silence of that cabin, Ethan felt complete. Not because the work was finished, but because he had passed it forward, had taught the lesson, had given his grandson the tools to change the world. That was all Margaret had ever asked. That was all Sarah had ever hoped. That was the legacy worth fighting for. The next morning, dawn. The snow had stopped. The sky broke clear and cold. Perfect traveling weather. Thomas stood by the wagon wearing his uniform, ready to leave, ready to become whatever the war would make him. Ethan walked out carrying a small pack. Almost forgot. One more thing. He handed Thomas a worn leather journal. Margaret's, the one she had kept all their married years. She wanted you to have this someday, figured today was that day. Thomas opened it, saw Margaret's handwriting, neat, precise, full of observations about life and faith and the nature of courage. The first entry read, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action despite fear. It is choosing right when every part of you wants to choose easy." Thomas looked up, eyes bright with tears he was trying not to shed. "Thank you, grandfather, for everything, for the stories, for the wisdom, for this." He touched the pocket holding the dollar. They embraced one final time. Thomas climbed into the wagon. The driver snapped the reins. The horses started forward. As the wagon pulled away, Thomas turned back, waved. Ethan waved back, hand raised in farewell, knowing he might never see the boy again, knowing war took the young and the old alike and showed no mercy to either, but also knowing he had given Thomas something more valuable than safety. He had given him understanding, the knowledge that one person matters, that one act of courage can ripple out across years and decades and generations, that one soul saved can change the world. The wagon disappeared over the horizon. Ethan stood watching long after it vanished. Then he turned back to the cabin, threw more wood on the fire, sat in Margaret's chair, closed his eyes, and whispered to the woman he still loved 30 years after losing her. "We did good, sweetheart. We passed it forward. Now someone else carries the torch." He opened his eyes, looked at the fire, thought about a dollar spent 30 years ago that had bought so much more than one woman's freedom. It had bought a chance, an opportunity to make things right. And sometimes that was all anyone needed. One chance, one choice, one moment of courage when it would have been easier to walk away. He smiled, sipped his whiskey, let the warmth spread through him. Outside, the sun rose higher. The snow began to melt. The world turned as it always did, indifferent to human stories and human struggles. But for those who lived them, who bled for them, who fought to make them matter, those stories were everything. They were proof that good could win, that justice could prevail, that one person standing up at the right moment could change the course of everything. Ethan Stone sat in his cabin on a mountain in West Virginia and felt peace settle over him like a warm blanket. He had done what Margaret asked, had honored her memory, had taught their grandson the most important lesson, that a single soul was worth everything, every risk, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt and fear and struggle. Because when you saved one soul, you saved the world. And 30 years ago, a mountain man paid $1 for a nun's freedom. That dollar had bought something priceless. It had bought hope, and hope, as it turned out, was the only currency that really mattered. The fire crackled. The cabin settled. Ethan closed his eyes and let himself rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new struggles, new chances to make the world a little bit better. But today, in this moment, he let himself simply be. A man who had done his best, who had fought the good fight, who had passed the torch to the next generation. That was enough. That was everything. That was the legacy of the dollar.